I don't own copyrights to the music. I don't own copyrights. Fair use.
Peter Nygard, as you've never seen him before.
He told me to film everything, so I had terabytes of footage.
This is previously unreleased footage, which Nygard's personal videographer is now sharing with us.
When I first was hired, Nygard told me that the reason why Jesus is so popular is because he had a good PR team. My job was to film literally everything.
Start spreading your legs.
And Stephen Ferraglio is also speaking out for the first time.
Nobody else in my world of Nygard has this evidence.
He used his power, his influence, his brand to show the world that I am Peter Nygard and I control everything I touch.
Very nice, very nice.
It's so disgusting, your fucking behaviors. It's the worst fucking place I visit. Sheer fucking neglect.
He knew how to buy people. He bought out politicians.
The young girls and women felt I had no choice. It's a tragic story.
Peter Nygard fought in court for years to keep this video private. Now, Stephen Ferraglio is making it public, beginning here with the Fifth Estate. Peter Nygard's name has been recognized here in the Bahamas for years, but arguably never more so than right now, with all the headlines about rape allegations and lawsuits. We're on our way to a private location to meet with the women behind those claims.
It was me, my sister, and my cousin were inside the mall on a Saturday, and then we ended up passing Nygard Slim store.
In a class action lawsuit filed in New York, she's among the first to come forward, called Jane Doe No. 1. And this is the first TV interview about her experience with Nygard. Just graduated from grade 9, she was shopping for pants at the Nygard store in the Bahamas.
Nygard came, took my measurements because he said he wanted to make sure all his customers have something that could fit them. Then we went to the front and took pictures.
This is Peter Nygard himself.
Yes.
Did you know who Peter Nygard was then?
Yeah, I know he had a key in the Bahamas, Nygard key.
And you knew he had a fashion
Yeah, the store
company.
name after him.
What she says happened next is now a familiar plot in the Bahamas.
He asked me about the modeling, and then this lady came and took my number.
Did you in fact hear from her?
3 days later, she told me she was coming to pick me up and what time to be ready for.
You're being picked up at your home and taken to Nygard Key?
Yeah, we had dinner. I still thought we were going to have this discussion about the modeling.
And did he in fact mention that?
No. But after he told me, let's go somewhere quiet so we discuss business.
Where did you go?
To his bedroom.
You gotta really decide in your head just what is it you want to do, and in a systematic way you drive yourself towards it. And then you have to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, this is what I have to do to get there.
It is not hard to find Peter Nygard boasting about his business prowess or his humble beginnings.
We didn't have running water, we didn't have heat.
Born in Finland, he arrived in Canada in 1952, the son of immigrants to Manitoba. By 1967, he had bought into a small women's clothing company, eventually naming it Tan J. Over the next several decades, he would grow that into Nygard International, a global fashion empire founded in Winnipeg.
If you want to be the best in the world, you can't pursue much more than that.
But while Nygard was building his brand, there were whispers and rumors about sexual misconduct. A dropped rape charge in 1980. Sexual harassment of his employees in the 1990s. But with the Me Too movement still decades away, none of it would stop Nygard. At least not yet. And if Peter Nygard managed to evade scrutiny in Winnipeg, His wealth and power would take him so much farther in his second home, the Bahamas. In the 1980s, Nygard purchased the western tip of New Providence, the main Bahamian island, and named it for himself. For about 3 years, videographer Stephen Ferralia was paid to document virtually everything that went on in Peter Nygard's world.
Every time Nygard was in Bahamas, we would have a pamper party on a Sunday. It would involve food, alcohol, dancing, music, volleyball, poker. Everyone would be drinking, they would be partying.
Those parties were promoted as a way to pamper local women with relaxation and fun. At least that's how Nygard described them.
It wasn't the pamper party that he described. Everything was just a giant illusion.
Rachette Ross began working as Nygard's massage therapist in 2009.
Well, as time went on, I realized it wasn't really a job. It was a giant whorehouse.
Ross said she didn't like what she saw at Nygard's parties, but felt she had no choice but to go along.
I was the only breadwinner in my home, and I had 6 dependents. In the Bahamas, no job is going to pay me what Nygard is paying me to do what I do. The pamper party was something set up to lure girls in for Mr. Nygard to have sex with them.
Nygard would just come down and choose a girl. Usually they would be drunk. He would be grabbing them, dancing with them, and then at the end of the night he would give me this signal, and that meant stop filming, and he would go upstairs to the room, sometimes with 2 or 3 or more girls.
I could remember a Bahamian girl going up to Nygard's room. She didn't want to have sex with him, and she managed to get out. She was naked, and she ran straight to the gate, and she tried to climb it. And his bodyguard came, and he dragged her down the fence, and he carried her back.
At parties like these, this was a common sight. And some of the women Nygard chose couldn't have fled if they'd wanted to.
If a female says no, workers would literally drug her and get her prepped for when Nygard is ready to go up with her.
Did you directly see this?
Yes, I have. The bartenders would usually slip roofies into the females' drinks, especially the ones that they know Nygard likes.
The Fifth Estate has spoken to 2 others who say they saw white powder at the bottom of glasses handed out by Nygard bartenders. And a total of 4 women have told us they believe they were drugged before being raped.
People who are impoverished, people who are looking for opportunities. Initially, they were invited to a party. Here are young people, young girls, who for the most part have never been in that kind of environment. So they're vulnerable, very vulnerable.
Pastor C.B. Moss says underprivileged girls from the Nassau neighborhood where he preaches were often invited to Nygard Key.
They're impressed with the opulence of the place, and then they fall victim.
She actually came to the neighborhood where we spend most of our time, and she told us that we could, if we wanted to go to Nygard Key.
In the lawsuit against Nygard, this woman is known as Jane Doe number 3. This is also her first television interview. She says she met Nygard in 2011.
I have never been on that side of the island, so it was amazing. So many, some beautiful palm trees. Everything was just luxurious, something I've never seen before. She came and asked me if I wanted to meet Mr. Nygard. And when I walked into the room, he told me that I could have a seat. He offered me a glass of wine, which I never drank the whole thing. After a few moments of answering questions, I felt really nauseous. I felt sick, like I wasn't myself. He said, let's go into, it was a bedroom area. It There was floral sheeting. I could remember there was a very large, like a mirror in the ceiling. There was a bay view where you could see directly. There was like the room was surrounded by water. He told me to sit onto the bed. He was pulling on my hand and stuff, and I felt so uncomfortable. I was confused. My head started spinning. I felt like I wanted to throw up. He started pushing on me, and I started saying, "Stop, stop." Everything was just spinning and rotating. He started pulling down on my sweatpants, and he penetrated me.
According to the lawsuit, Peter Nygard raped both Jane Doe number 1 and Jane Doe number 3 when they were 14 and 15 years old, respectively.
I've seen on numerous occasions females come, they are told that they're going to be the next top model, and it's nothing. After he already sexually abused them, he takes them and he forgets them just as quick as they come, as quick as they go.
The Fifth Estate has been investigating allegations like these for years, since our first Nygard documentary, which aired in 2010.
The Panther parties had nothing to do with trying to find a model. It was basically to procure women so that he would have the pick of the litter to decide who he was going to bed for the night.
Michelle and Alan May worked for Nygard as his property managers in the Bahamas. That's when they met a young woman from the Dominican Republic named Maribel Rodriguez.
I think she was like 17 and she could hardly speak any English, and
Thought she was coming to be
she thought she was coming to be a model.
Late one night, the Mays said something took place at Nygard Key that frightened her.
She just panicked, just started screaming and crying, and she ran out, and she actually ended up finding us.
When we first reported on that in 2010, Peter Nygard's lawyer sent us a statement from Maribel Rodriguez, insisting her stay was pleasant and fun, and calling Nygard a real gentleman.
So I first met Maribel Rodriguez on a trip to Dominican Republic, 2012. Maribel was there in the blue top.
Stephen Ferraglio says after Maribel's supposed vindication of Nygard in 2010, she soon found herself on his company payroll.
From then on, she became kind of like a personal assistant. She was often the closest in proximity to Nygard. I got to know her fairly well. She told me about her son and her mother were in Dominican Republic. Maribel is in the red. To kind of attract and keep the girls around, Nygard would promise them things, and these two girls in specific, he promised photo shoots.
1, 2, 3.
Maribel Rodriguez would travel the world with Nygard, and the traveling party he calls his girlfriend.
Thank you, Peter. It's an opportunity. Nice.
But as we'll show you, what might look like fun and games for people like Rodriguez was often anything but.
Yes, they travel with him, but mistreats them sometimes, verbal abuse, mental abuse.
And what happens if they try to leave against his will?
They're held hostage.
Literally kept?
Yes, the passports are automatically taken from them and are put in a safe in the front office. For you to leave, Mr. Nygard has to say, you can leave.
This was by far the most sinister, the most pervasive, the most perverse, and the most violent of all of the trafficking endeavors I've seen.
Lisa Haba and Greg Gutzler are the attorneys behind the U.S. lawsuit against Peter Nygard.
This is a very high-stakes case. I think this case is going to be complex because we have an international trafficking ring with its focus from New York City, from which it emanated, with tentacles all over the world, with hundreds of people that enabled, helped, and knew about this scheme.
That is, until a group in the Bahamas decided enough was enough.
It got nasty enough for Mr. Nygard, according to our allegations, to hire very dangerous men to kill us.
I think we're ready to start.
Okay, here's where I lose a daughter.
It's 2011, a big day for the Nygard family. Peter Nygard's daughter Aaliyah is getting married in Winnipeg. Family and friends have gathered for the celebration. Among them was the mayor of Winnipeg at the time, Sam Cates, and a high-profile guest from Nygard's second home.
Let me first congratulate the bride and groom, Derek.
Perry Christie is the former Prime Minister of the Bahamas and a friend of Peter Nygard.
He is a significant personality in the Bahamas, known for his philanthropy, a contributor to those who are in need.
Nygard's videographer Stephen Ferraglio documented the event.
Nygard knew Christie from years prior. Nygard says that he helped get Peter's citizenship in the Bahamas, so they had a long history.
He was having some difficulty with his residency, and I was introduced to him and facilitated the granting of that certificate that enabled him to be resident in the Bahamas.
A first favor, perhaps, but certainly not the last Peter Nygard would expect from his friend Perry Christie. Their relationship goes back at least as far as this letter from 1992, obtained by the Fifth Estate, sent by Nygard to Christie when the future Prime Minister was still a cabinet minister. In the letter, Nygard reminds him of the tens of thousands of dollars he's donated and asks for help with some housekeeping issues, including the recurring request to expand his waterfront property onto Bahamian Crown land. The whole world is based on one hand helping the other, Nygard writes.
This is Perry Christie. Hello, how are you?
In 2011, Perry Christie was again running to be Prime Minister. Peter Nygard at his side.
Nygard went to Las Vegas with some of the girls and Perry Christie. This was a photo from one of their dinners. You have Nygard, Perry Christie, and then all the way to the right, she has like a wad of cash stuffed in her bra. For whatever reason, she has the cash in her bra.
Tomorrow, when I'm sworn in as the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, all of you ought to take pride and credit for placing me in that position.
Yeah.
When Christie won, Nygard claimed the credit.
Yes! We took our country back! Isn't that wonderful? We won, we won, we won! They were the best nights of my life. I never thought I'd get so involved with politics of all things. Wow. Let alone be the key instrument in making it happen, for Christ's sake. Wow. But you know I got millions in it.
And days later, Nygard welcomed the victorious government ministers he had backed to Nygard Key.
Greatest victory ever. I was really supporting this guy.
It's a video that many Bahamians would have found absolutely despicable. We have Peter Nygard toasting champagne with very high-level political leaders and saying we've taken our country back. So for me, I found it quite repugnant.
Loretta Butler Turner was then the foremost female politician in the Bahamas, leader of the opposition when Nygard ally Perry Christie was Prime Minister.
You've called Peter Nygard someone who corrupts men.
A corrupter of men.
Define that as you saw it.
Anyone I feel that uses their money and influence to get people to help them achieve whatever it is they're hoping to achieve, or to turn a blind eye to whatever it is they're doing, a corrupter of men.
It is almost 30 years since Peter Nygard sent that first letter asking to expand his waterfront property, which would unlock so many other secrets and lies here at Nygard Key.
The American FBI is now investigating what happened behind the front gates of Peter Nygard's estate here in the Bahamas. Were there multiple acts of rape, as alleged? Was there an underage sex trafficking ring? For now, this is as far as we can get, at least on foot.
Peter Nygard was not known to me until I found out certain things that he was doing to deprive this beautiful area of what we have here today.
Environmental activist Joe Darville offered to take us to Nygard Key by boat for a view behind Nygard's now deserted gates.
Originally, there was absolutely no beach in front of his property here. It was basically the ocean. So he was able to build all of these mechanisms, and with pumping action from machinery, bringing in sand, he was able to fill in this area. It's totally artificial.
Joe Darville says that illicit dredging continued for over a decade, doubling Nygard's oceanfront land from 3 acres to about 6.
It baffles me that for almost 12 years, an individual could have carried on that amount of illegal activity and he was not put in jail. He knew how to buy people. There's no doubt about that at all. We had to fight against not just him, but we had to fight against the government.
This individual liked to project himself as larger than life. He just wanted to be known as a generous benefactor to the Bahamas because he loves the Bahamas. This benevolence was really toward a purpose, a selfish purpose.
Pastor Moss teamed up with environmentalist Darville and Nygard's neighbor, American billionaire Louis Bacon, to stop Peter Nygard from stealing all that sand from the Bahamian public.
He was not willing to discuss it. He just wanted to have his way.
And how nasty did that get?
Oh, very nasty. When my vehicle was parked at the front of my home, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my daughter saw a vehicle slowly driving by. 2 individuals got out and threw an incendiary device on the car, and the car went up in flames, and they drove off. It was frightening, but it didn't deter us. And in addition to that, we were not going to be intimidated.
I was attacked at Jaws Beach by about 9 men, and I escaped with my life.
When human rights lawyer Fred Smith joined the group, he became a target too. In a lawsuit filed in the Bahamas, 2 men swore that Nygard had hired them as hitmen.
It got nasty enough for Mr. Nygard, according to our allegations, to hire very dangerous men to kill us.
But those sworn statements were never proven in court, and Nygard denies it all.
They spent years allowing him to do whatever he wanted to do. They were giving him a get-out-of-jail-free card.
The victory is not mine. The victory is yours.
Then, in 2017, there was a change of government in the Bahamas.
Dr. Hubert Minnis will be sworn in as the 4th Prime Minister of an independent Bahamas.
Peter Nygard's friend Perry Christie lost power. And about the same time, Nygard's fortunes took a dramatic decline too.
Nygard was found guilty today of contempt of court and has until March 21st to pay a $50,000 fine or spend 14 days behind bars.
I don't think he could set foot on this island again, or he's going to end up in jail.
Nygard was accused of breaching an order prohibiting him from continued dredging until the conclusion of a judicial review.
The public and people around Nygard, people that perhaps had a lot to say, started to see that, the law could actually work.
Lawyer Fred Smith says it was the beginning of the end for Peter Nygard and his enablers in the Bahamas.
More and more people just started talking about, we can give you information about how he treats his employees. These pamper parties aren't what they seem. And a few people started to share information about women being abused at Nygard Key sexually.
And as you'll see, it wouldn't be long before those women began to come forward themselves to tell what they knew about Peter Nygard. And the question of how it was all kept secret was about to be answered. That when we come back.
The government of the Bahamas gave him a sanctuary within which to operate a criminal sex trafficking ring.
It was well after midnight when Rochette Ross picked up her boss, Peter Nygard, at Nassau Airport.
He told me he needs me to take him somewhere. I'm like, sir, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Where are we going? He took me to this track road off of Jaws Beach.
At the beach was another vehicle, which he recognized as belonging to a senior politician in the Bahamas.
I killed my headlights, and Nygard told me that he's going to go out, give him a few minutes. I opened up the bag which was in the back seat. And in each of the bags, well, at least one of them that I opened, had stacks of $10,000 US cash.
She says that's when a man came and took the bags of cash from her back seat. Over the years, Rochette Ross had become a close Nygard confidant, with duties well beyond her job as his massage therapist.
I have dropped monies to political members in reference to this.
So you've delivered money to politicians?
Yes, sir, I have.
And she says it wasn't only politicians who got envelopes of cash. Senior police officers did too.
Any female coming in claiming that they were raped or human trafficked or kidnapped, there would never be an official police report. It would always be something where Mr. Nygard knew where the female lived, where she was either intimidated or paid off to disappear.
To back up her allegations, Rochette Ross provided us with 3 months of her own bank records from 2016, showing almost $60,000 deposited from the parent company Nygard International, and large cash withdrawals made afterwards. She says the accountant funneled money through her when Nygard was out of the country, so she could make the payments for him. And the Fifth Estate has spoken to 3 additional sources who witnessed both politicians and police being paid by Nygard employees, and in one case, by Nygard himself. We asked the Royal Bahamas National Police about those allegations of bribery, but the police commissioner has refused to answer direct questions, citing the U.S. criminal case. He did state publicly that we have not received any complaints about complicity of any officers of the Royal Bahamas Police. And we asked former Prime Minister Perry Christie about his financial relationship with Peter Nygard. We reached him by phone.
I've spent 43 years in public life. There's no equivocation about my commitment to integrity. And so I just want to be able to say it clearly and as strongly as I possibly can to you. I have no fear of any investigation into my conduct in my public life. Full stop.
But even for longtime Nygard employee Rochette Ross, there would be a breaking point.
It became too much for me when PJN decided that he wanted to have a camp at Nygard Key for minor kids.
One day, during Nygard's children's camp, Ross lost track of her 13-year-old sister.
So immediately I started to search the compound to look for her. And I bucked Mr. Nygard, taking my sister in her swimsuit up to his room. I asked her, "Where are you going?" She said, "Mr. Nygard said that he wants me to model a Nygard Slim for him." I told her, I said, "Go back to the beach." And when she left, I looked at him and he looked at me and he gave me this smirk. And when he did that, everything in me just left. Because you didn't just cross a line. You just blatantly disrespect everything in me. You broke everything.
Rochette Ross kept working for Nygard, but decided she could no longer stay silent.
Rochette and a number of other people started sharing information with us, and victims started coming forward. I've come to discover from everything that people have told me, Nygard was pure abuse to people.
And for Peter Nygard's opponents in the Bahamas, the floodgates were about to open.
It's almost like a pyramid scheme where he would just keep building from the bottom and people would keep moving up, and you would have this exponential effect of one trafficked woman would then become a recruiter. She would find 4, those 4 would find 4, and then you've got this unbelievable labyrinth of people, and everybody kept perpetrating this scheme.
It's the explosive lawsuit that's prompted comparisons to Jeffrey Epstein and the island.
By February 2020, American lawyers Lisa Haba and Greg Gutzler believed they had all they needed. They filed a lawsuit in New York on behalf of the first 10 women alleging multiple acts of rape and sexual assault by Peter Nygard.
He picked the Bahamas, right? What ends up happening is he can operate in plain sight, and the government of the Bahamas gave him a sanctuary within which to operate a criminal sex trafficking ring.
10 women have launched a class action lawsuit against...
When that news broke, there were international headlines, and a Nygard insider would come forward. His story supported by hundreds of hours of exclusive video.
If I don't expose him, he's going to get away with all the things that he's been doing. Nobody else in my world of Nygard has this evidence.
That's when we return. February 2020, shortly after the first 10 women sued Peter Nygard for rape.
The FBI and the NYPD descended on the Times Square offices as part of the criminal investigation into allegations of sex trafficking.
Soon afterwards, Peter Nygard steps down from his own company.
The allegations are completely false. They'll be vigorously defended. They are part of a vicious and malicious conspiracy which has been going on for about 10 years against Nygard by his enemies.
Nygard's enemy number one and alleged chief conspirator is his neighbor in the Bahamas, billionaire Louis Bacon.
Two Canadian women who say they were raped by former fashion executive Peter Nygard are telling their stories publicly for the first time.
18 are Canadian. Tonight, for the first time.
But the CBC soon broke a series of stories proving the allegations of rape date back before Louis Bacon even moved to the Bahamas in 1994. Canadian actor and model April Tulloch says Nygard raped her in Winnipeg a year earlier. Danish-born employee Jana Larsen told us Nygard raped her on a business trip to Asia in 1980. And former international model Casey Allen says Nygard raped her at his Winnipeg warehouse in 1979. His hometown, so loyal for so long, was turning against him.
I thought, honestly, nobody else in my world of Nygard has this evidence.
And then there was Nygard videographer Stephen Ferraglio.
I think that when people think that they are above the law, the best way to show them that they are not is to literally show them. There's evidence that I have that I can contribute. I can now do my part to make it right.
Nygard had sued to stop the public from seeing Ferraglio's video, showing him as he really is.
Some of these are kind of more difficult for me to watch, but I'll just go ahead and show you.
I don't give a fuck about you being inside my bed.
Nygard definitely has a temper.
This is so disgusting, your fucking behaviors. It's the worst fucking place I visit. Whatever we now have to do with this stupidity, we should check them together.
He screamed at us, and he screamed at me a lot. It was a very stressful environment.
I don't make the law here, Nygard. Well, I'm just following it.
You're not following my law.
Stephen Ferraglio approached Nygard nemesis Louis Bacon, requesting living and legal expenses in return for sharing all the video he'd got. That includes Peter Nygard's X-rated life on the road.
Life on the plane is, there's food, and then there's poker, and then there's karaoke, and then there's maybe a movie, and then there's this. There's drinking and dancing. Nygard had a bed on the plane, and he would have sex with the girls up in the front of the plane. This video was taken on Nygard's airplane in 2012. She's the girl who's underage. I saw her at a pamper party, I think was the first time. She just became one of the girlfriends. They were around when Nygard needed sex, and they would accompany Nygard to dinner. They would be paraded in during the meetings. Nygard would call them the girlfriends.
You like it?
It's really nice. I love this suite.
This is in Las Vegas, and he's confused. He thinks that there's more girlfriends than are actually there.
We're all going to stay in this suite, so it'll be so big, so we got that. You guys are with me, and you guys, how many we got when he goes? Is there one missing?
This is in London.
Here, Nygard is in the athletes' village at the 2012 Olympics.
But just to be here, Olympics, and to be running, good for you. That's just, and that's 16 yet.
He finds out during this conversation that she is 16 years old.
We're gonna feed you a cell number or something, yeah? 2 phone numbers. I don't want to lose her now that I found her.
Part of what educates this is, in the past, girls have said, I found somebody else so that I don't have to sleep with Nygard tonight. This is very stereotypical of what a recruiting session would be.
And remember then 17-year-old Maribel Rodriguez, who we reported had been very frightened one night at Nygard Key?
She sat right next to me, and she just, tears were rolling down. I said, put my arm around her. I said, what's wrong? And she says, I have to get out of here.
After Maribel Rodriguez's statement to us calling Peter Nygard a gentleman, Nygard sued the Fifth Estate, not only civilly asking for money, but a little-used criminal libel action under the Criminal Code of Canada, in which the maximum penalty isn't financial. It's 5 years in prison for the Fifth Estate producers and myself. Meanwhile, Nygard had hired Maribel Rodriguez as his personal assistant, and she went virtually everywhere with him. But behind the scenes, Stephen Ferralio says it was clear Peter Nygard was abusing her.
We were staying in a hotel in China, and I heard screaming from down the hall, and it was Maribel and Nygard, and he was just screaming at her, and she was on the floor, and she was crying, and she was just very, very distraught.
Ferralio says one day he was ordered to set up his camera for what was called a top-secret interview with Rodriguez.
She had a statement up off to the side of the camera. I had to cut the camera multiple times. Maribel was crying, and we would stop. I would help her pronounce words. It was very obvious that this statement was written for her, and she was reading it sort of against her will.
A senior Nygard employee who was present denies the statement was coerced, but what was the point of writing it for her in the first place?
I remember her saying, Peter Nygard was nothing but a gentleman to me. I never met the maze.
We asked Stephen Ferralio why he thinks Maribel Rodriguez would have agreed to say that.
I remember her saying, this job is crazy. He's crazy, but I have to do it. I have to support my family. I know that she would take her paychecks and send them directly to her mother and her son.
This past November, the criminal libel charges against us in Manitoba finally were stayed. Peter Nygard's prosecution of the Fifth Estate was discontinued when the key witness, his former personal assistant Maribel Rodriguez, refused to testify against the CBC. We recently reached out to Rodriguez through her lawyer, but we're told she is not answering questions at this time. As for Richette Ross, she's faced accusations too. Nygard claims she got money for making false allegations against him, pointing to a New York Times story that 2 Nygard accusers were paid to lie.
I believe personally that they're just running scared.
She also was targeted for the salary she got from the group opposing Nygard in the Bahamas, as well as for housing worth about $5,000 a month.
Shortly after I relocated, the apartment that I was living in was shot up. If I was still living there, what would have become of me? What would have become of my kids? Dealing with this situation with Mr. Nygard is very serious, because you're not just touching a multi-millionaire, you're touching the Bahamas government, you're touching the police force.
And questions about Richette Ross's role in the Nygard saga still follow her, seen as part enabler, part whistleblower, but in the end, as part victim too.
I remember turning to tell him, I'm not feeling well, and that's the last thing I remember. I was in and out of consciousness. The first time I opened up my eyes, my bottoms were removed, and I remember blacking out for a while, and when I opened up my eyes again, he was on top of me.
In the U.S. lawsuit, Richette Ross is Jane Doe number 8. CBC News has spoken directly with a total of 19 women who say they were raped by Peter Nygard, and they all share one emotion: relief that Nygard's secrets and lies are now, finally, being exposed.